So, a common question that gets asked in fitness circles is whether training arms directly is an absolute necessity, or can we just rely on heavy compound movements to essentially grow it. Now, if I were to answer in a very simple fashion, I'd say that you should hit your arms separately, but perhaps not prioritize it equally relative to other compound movements. You can train it sporadically sometimes, catering to your weaknesses that is affecting, let's say, a chain of entire movement. Now, since we are on this topic, let's clarify one thing, that compound movements, even though they hit a bunch of different muscles, they don't do they don't hit all the muscles optimally, and certainly there is a hierarchy. Like, for example, let's say pull up variations. If you do wide grip, there's slightly more emphasis on the lats relative to the arms. If you do it, let's say close grip, chin up kind of a movement, you will feel it more in your biceps. So you are only as strong as your weakest link. But despite all of these variations, I personally think that if we were to target and strengthen the weakest link in the muscle group, you'll find yourself that it'll pay off, and you can maybe like you can rely on compound movements for a short while again before switching back to, let's say, doing more isolations. Um, so let me clarify this part again. What I mean is that you don't necessarily have to keep an arm day, or even um, do these kind of arm workouts routinely and regularly. So you can maybe do it once in every 14 days. Another important tool that I'd like to um, share with you uh, with regards to not having to hit arms separately. Now, this is a trick that I stumbled upon on a Reddit post, and I've been incorporating um, the rule recently in my workouts. It is a bit of pre-activation. Now, you might have heard of pre-fatiguing, which is basically doing isolation work prior to the compound movement that includes that isolation muscle group. So, for example, let's say you hit your quads, you do leg extensions first, really go for that pump, that burn, and then do squat AMRAP. Um, Basically, you are effectively weakening the quads in some sense. Let's maybe weakening is not the right word, but you are stimulating it enough so that it becomes the weakest link and it gets the maximum stimulations from the squat that follows the isolation work, if that makes sense. So this is a less extreme version of that. We just do light warm up. Effectively, let's say you take a very light weight and do around 8 reps before the burn sets in. If you feel the burn kicks in, you just stop, and then wait for at least a minute. Remember, we are not trying to stimulate muscle growth in our triceps or the smaller isolation muscle group right away. And so we are effectively doing the opposite of the short rest period principle. We are spacing out between the two sets. Both will be warm up sets, so very light, and then basically hitting all the muscle groups with very light weight prior to hitting the compounds. And this works like magic when it comes to doing overhead presses. Because today I hit shoulders. Just 3 days ago I did the same workout, but on that day I warmed up very properly. Like I did all kinds of shoulder rotations and uh, flies and sort of isometric work with 1 kilo dumbbells, and the workout was absolutely smooth. It almost like today I did it. I skipped the warm up session altogether, and I could feel it in my elbows a little bit more. Like there was a little less of a. I would say it was far less smooth compared to the other session. Now, this might seem like something that's very obvious to people warming up, right? But we generally tend to discuss warm ups in the context of really taxing compound movements, especially lower body dominant ones, such as squats and deadlifts, with relatively higher risk of injury. But if you follow this principle, you will effectively activate the entire chain, and then based on your own need you can do a little bit of isolation work. Now this is of course assuming that you are asking this question uh, purely from a functional standpoint, in the sense, will I be able to still retain my push strength, pull strength? Of course, for aesthetic purposes it's always better to incorporate some isolation work. Um, and I believe in sticking to the staples, the classics, such as uh, barbell barbell curls, easy bar curls, seated dumbbell curls, of that nature. Another tip I'd like to share in this regard is that if you're pairing your isolation work with heavy compound work, in the sense if you are doing it on the same day, um, you can try assigning higher priority to single arm based movements with dumbbells, and I mean only one arm movements, not even alternating dumbbell ones, right? So that way it's less taxing on your CNS. It might take you slightly longer, but there's less, the systemic peak systemic fatigue, it literally halves. So if you're doing, let's say, 10 kilos, doing barbell curl with 10 kilos, and you, instead of that, you just do uh, curls with 5 kilos, uh, one at a time, I mean. So there's a lot less fatigue. Another thing is to maximize volume, is to um, start with light dumbbell work, single arm work, and then give yourself sufficient amount of rest, and then really going hard on the barbell movement. So that is quite the sweet spot between having enough volume and having enough intensity. Now, since we are already on the topic, I'd like to discuss something slightly unrelated to the topic with regards to intensity versus volume when it comes to isolation work, or any work for that matter. People push the intensity uh, factor a lot these days, which is something I agree, but I generally think that there's some relation between higher volume and intensity, in the sense that if you start with heavy dumbbell work, heavy let's say heavy bicep curl, you will feel that your CNS isn't primed enough. So if you ramp it up, you would need to go through all of different, let's say, warm up sets, and that is volume. I mean, uh, unless we are strictly defining volume by our working sets, but it all adds up, right? So what I mean is that if you are really comparing, let's say 10 into 10 German volume program with only two sets of intensity, maybe that's a topic of that's a separate topic of discussion. But generally speaking, you can't hit your top set right away. You would need to go through all the sets, so there has to be enough volume. But maybe you are not failing right away, you are not going absolutely crazy on each and every last rep of every set. So that's my 2 cents on the importance of uh, doing isolation work, especially with regards to arms. If you found this video helpful, uh, make sure to like and subscribe to my channel. I'm also a fitness coach. If you're interested in working with me one-on-one, my email is in the description, or drop a comment below in case I haven't put my email already. So see you again. Take care.